Hi, I'm Russ Banham, and with me today is Bret Ahnell at FM Global. Bret, good to be talking with you again.
Likewise, good to see you, Russ.
Great. So just weeks ago, the World Economic Forum declared that on top of COVID-19, weather events, extreme ones, continue to be a top global risk for companies doing business, threatening both their operations and their financial value. Doesn't insurance take care of that? Why worry?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, in the face of any disruptive event, and you named a few of them, we've had plenty in 2020, and then throw a pandemic on top of all of that. And then in addition to that, we have our normal human-related events of fires and mechanical breakdown, to name a few. But, oftentimes after a major event like this, the difference between a major disaster that's going to have longer-term implications to the business and maybe a minor distraction that's probably not going to linger all that long, but it's going to be a bit of a discomfort, a bit of a distraction, a little bit of cleanup for a couple of days. The difference between the two often does come down to a choice that any company can make, and that's the choice to be resilient or to just rely upon hope or good fortune to get you through it. But when you look at the role of insurance, I mean, insurance is going to protect you against the distraction. I mean, that's truly what insurance is built to do. But disasters can and they often do have long-term consequences. And they are going to stretch beyond, the normal insurance recovery. And one of those implications, as we found, is going to be the loss of long-term shareholder value.
And we're talking about risk mitigation here. What are companies doing right in terms of managing those physical exposures? What are they doing right? Where are they getting it wrong?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think maybe I'll answer it just around the psychology of risk improvement, for lack of a better term. But, we're all humans. And you think about, it's hard to imagine the unimaginable ever occurring, because we always are going to hide behind the fact it's not going to happen to me. It never has. It's always going to happen to the other guy. I'm better than that, whatever the scenario may be. But when you start looking at great companies and great leadership behind those organizations, they're not afraid to answer or ask the question of the what if scenario. It may be as remote as ever, but what if that Category 4 hurricane were to strike? What if that river were to have its boundaries overtopped and I get 2 feet of water in my facility? Or what if that fire starts in the warehouse and it makes its way through my facility and I lose a critical building? And if the answer to all that, the outcome is a completely acceptable one and there's no long-term implications, I've analyzed it, I've had the facts, great. You'll sleep well at night, you've done your due diligence. But I do think, though, that oftentimes the scenario runs deeper than that. And it runs through the insurance recovery period, and you start to bring in things like loss of market share, loss of investor confidence in future cash flows, and even things like major reputational damage, things that are going to take months, if not years, to recover from, and they all have dollar signs attached to them. That when you add it all up, it may not be an acceptable outcome, and it may have major implications to the well-being of your organization. And if that's going to occur, then the answer is to take action now to prevent that from ever occurring, and that's invest in risk improvement. So ultimately, it does come down to a choice to be resilient. And it comes down to really, do you want to be having that conversation with your board just talking about a success story, or having that conversation just trying to defend a disaster that you now have on your hands?
So we're talking money at a time when a CFO has so many competing demands for capital. How do you make the argument that risk resilience is worth it?
Just to kind of tell you a quick story, we actually had commissioned an analytics firm earlier in the year to look at that correlation between big losses and ultimate impact on shareholder value. And we looked at it in the aftermath of the 2 major years of hurricanes, 2017 and 18, with Harvey, Irma, Maria, and then Florence and Michael in 18. And what this firm did is they looked at a number of publicly traded companies that had experienced financial damage, and they reported on their annual 10K statements. And what they found was that those companies that had reported the damage had seen their shareholder value drop by, on average, about 5% the ensuing year. So we didn't stop there. We said, well, let's take a look at the FM Global portfolio. We insure about 1 out of 3 Fortune 1000 companies, and we make loss prevention recommendations to all of our clients around the globe to really help them prevent against acts of God and man-made events. And what we found is that those companies who had followed all of our advice and had done all the recommendations that we had asked them prior to those hurricanes occurring and had really fortified their locations, actually saw their shareholder value rise on average of about 7% or about $2 billion. And then conversely, the other set of clients that were exposed to those same events that hadn't quite got to everything yet. And we saw the aftermath of those clients that saw their shareholder value drop by an average of around 3%, or the tune of about $1.5 billion. So it's about a 10-point swing or about $3.5 billion. And that's really the difference between, for lack of a better term, the winners and the losers after a major event.
So there is a connection. Dollars well spent on long-term value. Bret, thank you for joining us, and thank you everyone as well.